Hello and welcome to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com, where we bring you news, analysis and insight on that most important of the least important things, football. I am Ronan Murphy and I'm delighted to be joined by Peter Staunton, editor at Anfield Watch, for a super special extra Liverpool episode. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks very much, Ronan. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and when we were talking to Duncan about the possibility of this episode, Peter said that he hoped it wasn't too much like every pub in Ireland on an average weekend where it's just two Irish guys talking about Liverpool, but hopefully we'll bring you a bit more insight and a bit more analysis than that. So Liverpool at the moment, they are in transition, but although some of their least favoured fans, the people who aren't Liverpool fans, are saying online that how can they be in transition when they spent so much money? So hopefully Peter is here to pick the bones on that, and we can figure out what's going on, or what's going right, what's going on wrong for Liverpool. So the big talking point is how much they spent on forwards this summer. So Hugo Ekitike, he's been pretty good, hasn't he?
Yeah, Ekitike, I think he's got 5 goals in his opening 10 appearances for Liverpool. Really picked up the baton and ran with it when Alexander Isak wasn't fit at the start of the season. Got off the mark straight away. And generally looked like, to the manner born, he fitted in straight away. Made people forget about the need really for Isak. And I think once Isak does get up to speed, the opportunity of maybe feeling the two of them together, or one of them pushing the other on to new and exciting heights, will be a hell of a prospect for Liverpool. Right now, you would say I think Ekitike probably stands out as head and shoulders right now as the best signing that they've made, only because he is the one who's taken to life at Anfield, I would think, the quickest. Very confident player. You know that from watching him in the Bundesliga last year. He'll always back himself. Probably took his game to a new height last year. He was expressing himself a lot more. We saw a bit more of that fancy footwork. He wasn't just a target man, scoring all kinds of goals, creating all kinds of chances. And I think he's carried that form really, really well into his first few games for Liverpool this season.
Yeah, and if you look at all the strikers that the various Premier League clubs brought in, he is the one with the most goals so far. He is the one with 5 goals in 10 games, like you said. So Hugo Ekitike has proved an ideal signing. And I think at the time, maybe when he was coming in, some Liverpool fans were kind of sceptical that he would be maybe another Darwin Núñez, or he mightn't hit those heights.
I don't know. I don't think that was ever going to be the case. Maybe some fans thought that because they hadn't seen a lot of him, or had seen him go to a big club before in going to Paris Saint-Germain and not really doing the business. But look, Ekitike has been on the list for Liverpool since Klopp was there. I think 2022 they had a look at him when he was playing for Reims. He ended up going to PSG after that. Didn't work out from a PSG for various reasons. I mean, that was the dysfunctional unit that had Messi, Neymar, Mbappe all there ahead of him. Very, very hard to stand out in a team like that. Got his career back on track then with Eintracht Frankfurt, and he's one that never went away for Liverpool. I know there was probably some speculation over the summer that Liverpool signed Ekitike in an attempt to annoy Newcastle in some way, shape or form, because Newcastle thought they were close to a deal. But in actual fact, this has been a player that has been on the Liverpool radar for a long, long time. They know how well he could fit into the system. And the recruitment team have done exceptional homework on Ekitike over the last few years.
It'd be a very expensive way to annoy someone. Usually I would tap them on one shoulder and run to the other side. Well, that might be a cheaper approach.
It's hard to find value in the Premier League. Some of the prices that get discussed, I mean, you end up shaking your head at. But look, at the end of the day, the price is the price. I think it was 69-70 million pounds initially for Hugo Ekitike. And look, that's the going rate for somebody who can score goals in the Premier League. That's just a matter of fact. And I think over the course of his contract, if he stays fit, stays consistent, as he started off pretty well. I don't think anybody will be grumbling about the fee for Hugo Ekitike. Just like nobody ever really mentions the fee for Van Dijk anymore.
Yeah, true. Yeah. We'll move along quickly from the Van Dijk fee. Yeah, I get that gets brought up every Christmas, but when that comes around. But yeah, we'll put that in the past. But Alexander Isak, he was obviously the marquee sign, maybe one of the marquee signings of the summer. We were kind of waiting for it to happen. But look, obviously just said he's not up to speed or he's not up to full fitness yet. He's still working on that. And not training with Newcastle was probably a key reason for that. But how does Slot kind of fit in Ekitike and Isak going forward, do you think?
Well, look, so far, I'm not sure the exact number of minutes they've played together, but right now it doesn't look like he's going to play the two of them at the same time, at least from the beginning of matches. So that would probably indicate to me that eventually Isak will become the number one striker for Liverpool. And, you spend 125 million on him. You see his track record in the Premier League, and there's a reason why he's going for that amount of money. It's hard. It would be harsh on Ekitike if he ends up being simply a backup. But I don't see Liverpool playing with two forwards. That's the thing. Certainly two out and out centre forwards. If the two of them do get into the team, it's probably more likely that Ekitike will play from the left. We've got issues there at the moment. I know fans are really. They're not sold on Cody Gakpo at the moment. They've got Rio Ngamoa, who's coming up behind him and looks a real world beater. Obviously, Florian Wirtz, I'm sure we'll get to him as well, could feature from the left too. But I think if Ekitike is going to be in the team alongside Isak, it's going to have to be on his, what you might call his second preference, which is on the left wing. Look, Isak he had a very, very strange summer. Probably the most disrupted summer he'll ever have in his career. Didn't go on tour with Newcastle to the Far East, citing, I think, an injury to his hamstring or to his thigh at the time. So missed out on those few games in the Far East. And then training alone in Real Sociedad's facilities, that's when he was, hinting that there were broken promises from Newcastle and so forth. And then, he took himself on strike for the first few games of the season. Now, you've seen it in a few different sources that Liverpool expected Isak to be up to speed by about now, we would say, after this international break. So actually, these two games that he's got upcoming for Sweden against Switzerland and Kosovo are huge, I think, for Isak to demonstrate that he can get 90 minutes under his belt, that he can be a consistent threat, and then he can hit the ground running when he comes back after the international break. Because, I watched the video with Lewis Steele, Liverpool insider who works for the Daily Mail, and he said that, he still could be 3 or 4 weeks away from full fitness, but the previous expectation would be that by at the end of the October international break, he should be up to speed. So, look, Liverpool have to be patient with him because, he's adapting to a new style of play, adapting to a new manager, adapting to a new club, a bigger club, let's say. But, they're going to have to get a return on that 125 million sometime soon, especially since they're when they are winning games, they're not winning them. They're not going 2-0 up like they did last year and killing games off. They're in games right until the last minute at the moment, and they could do with maybe some of those extra goals that they had last year just to give them a little bit more breathing space in matches. And that's what Isak is going to be expected to do. He's going to have to get up and running soon.
Yeah, I think this international break could be good for him because he's back in familiar environment, and like you said, Liverpool isn't a familiar environment to him yet. He still has time to build that, I suppose. And it's a crucial window for Sweden too if they want to get to the World Cup.
Exactly,
so this is a big time for him.
It was such a disrupted way of joining Liverpool as well. I think, he flew in, he did his photo shoot, he held up his shirt, and then he's gone. He went on international duty again. He didn't even have time to meet and greet his new teammates or anything like that.
Try out the coffee bar.
Exactly, the world famous Liverpool coffee bar with Szoboszlai and Salah. He didn't even have time to do any of that. So, by the time he came back from that international break, and, that's when he was just getting acquainted with everybody around the place. Now I've seen reports also that Liverpool were quite impressed with what they'd seen in the opening few sessions from Isak, that he was looking sharp. Has that translated onto the pitch? So far, I would say no. To be perfectly honest, he did get his goal against Southampton. He got an assist at the weekend against Chelsea. Not sure he meant it, if I'm perfectly honest. But more indicative of the struggles that he's having was the game against Galatasaray. I think he had half an hour off the bench. He touched the ball 4 times, and his first touch was a shot on goal that maybe he should have scored. But after that, he was just a shadow in the game. So they are going to have to figure out a way to get him more involved. And that's the issue. We'll go through the rest of the signings. They haven't integrated those signings so far very well. The exact opposite issue that they had last year, where it was essentially Klopp's squad tweaked slightly in terms of how they played, but so familiar with one another. They all knew the script, whereas this year there's 4 or 5 new starters at any given time trying to establish themselves in the team, and that's not easy.
The big one is the centre of the memes at the moment. The 007 meme has come for the Community Shield. Obviously, it's not a competitive match for some players or for meme makers.
It probably is for Mikel Arteta. It counts it as a trophy.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a Liverpool episode without an Arsenal dig in it. Anyway, so yeah. Florian Wirtz, he doesn't have the same excuse as Isak. He arrived early. He was on Liverpool's kind of early signing, so they brought him through the door. He should be up to speed by now. But I think if you look at him in matches, you can see it. It's kind of there, but it hasn't turned into statistics, or it hasn't turned into. No, you know that this is going to be a talented guy, but it's just not there yet.
Well, I mean, you're the Bundesliga expert, so you've watched them probably more than I have, for sure. And I was going to throw that one back at you. What do you think the issue is with Wirtz right now when you see him playing? And I'll give you my theory after.
I think obviously the physicality of the Premier League is different. He doesn't have the same sort of space that he had in the Bundesliga, which is why you see a lot of these players and the Bundesliga attacks being mentioned a lot. You'll see a lot of these players struggle. Timo Werner obviously wasn't going to score 25 goals for Chelsea every season when he came over. It wasn't going to be the same sort of thing. I think Wirtz, a lot has been put on his shoulders.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is huge expectations, and that comes with the price tag. It also comes with the expectations that were set in Germany before he even left. He was kind of their next big thing. He's their next big superstar, more so than even Musiala probably was considered as the next superstar in Germany. And I think a lot of weight of expectation is there. He's probably putting a lot of weight on his own shoulders. I think he's trying to prove himself. He's trying to live up to that price tag. I think there are moments, like I said, where you can see that he's trying to do the right thing, or he is doing the right thing, and he's creating these chances, and there's stats come out that he has created so many chances, but they're not big chances like maybe he would have created for Leverkusen. And it is an adaptation coming from the way that Alonso was playing, the openness, the fluidness, the kind of speed and the vertical aspect of the Alonso game compared to what Slot is doing. And I think he just has to adapt, and it will take time, but I think he will get there. And I think we'll be looking back at these 007 memes and thinking, what was that all about? Because this guy is absolutely world class.
Yeah, well, people only analyze footballers right now by their stats, by their SOFA scores, all of that kind of thing. And actually, the art of watching a game of football has probably gone out the window. You know that as well as I do. That said, I do have concerns about Wirtz right now. I think it comes from a positional sense. I'm not sure if his long-term future at Liverpool is going to be in that number 10 position for a few different reasons. The first one is, I think, actually, for Liverpool, I think Dominic Szoboszlai is better in there. Now, he's not as good a footballer, let's say, as Florian Wirtz, but I actually think he suits Liverpool better when he plays there. And I think when Szoboszlai isn't in that key position, in that number 10 position, let's say, I think it has a knock-on effect everywhere on the team. But then I also think when I was watching Wirtz last year, although he would be named as a number 10, they generally played with two number 10s sitting there behind the striker. Mm-hmm. He was always sort of from the left. He would drift out towards the left wing, and the tacticals would call that position the half space, so it's sort of just outside the opposition 18-yard box, and then, maybe getting towards the number 8 position. He loved having the ball there and having a bit of space on the ball there, and he could look inside and he could find those through balls. So a great example of it, I think it was in the Galatasaray game last week when he moved to the left wing, and he put the first cross he had was a beautiful in-swinging ball towards the back post, and I think it was Bradley that had the header, really should have scored from it. And I think that was an example of what he can do from that position. I just think it's all too compressed for Liverpool because, they have the ball all the time. They're always pushing their centre-backs right up to the halfway line, which means that the midfielders and the forwards have so little space to work in. And then Wirtz is getting the ball into feet at the edge of the 18-yard box, and he still has a line to beat from there. I think it's all a little bit too tight for him. For me, he's a player who needs to have that open space in front of him, do a dribble, maybe play a through ball. And I think it might take Slot a little bit of time to accommodate him in the best possible fashion. But for me, it just looks natural. Put Szoboszlai in that number 10 position and play Wirtz slightly from the left. I'm not sure if he's going to be that number 10 that Slot maybe expects him to be.
Well, maybe he could be the new left winger that you were saying. Ekitike could get used out there. So maybe Florian Wirtz is going to be the answer there, and Ekitike on the bench. I'm
100% not going to sit here and slam Florian Wirtz because I think he's a brilliant player. I think he's a fantastic player. I'm just not sure if he's been utilised. Like a lot of the new signings, I don't think he's been utilised maybe in in the most optimal of manners right now by Arne Slot.
Yeah, of course. And you see kind of Salah struggling this season as well. And I know a lot of that, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Diogo Jota's passing during the summer. And I think there's such weight on these players, and who knows how players deal with grief and how people deal with grief. We've all lost people close to us and how it affects you. And I see people are kind of slaying it. All they're using it as an excuse as they lose, what about they win, and all this sort of stuff. But the grief will hit you at different times, whether you're up, you're down. And I think Salah, he does have a weight on his shoulders, perhaps, that he didn't have before. And I think as well as that, if you look at the stats last season, there's no way he could have the same season again, because that's the best season we've ever seen in the Premier League. So with the team adapting, the team kind of changing, the team having this tragic loss in the summer, it's no surprise that Salah is going to maybe struggle at times this season and not be the Salah that we've seen in the past.
Yeah. I think the knock-on effect from losing Trent Alexander-Arnold has been big on Salah. I've been reading through some of the data. I mean, obviously it passes the eye test. If you just watch Liverpool, you can see they miss Trent Alexander-Arnold. I know that's not going to be a popular thing for Liverpool fans to hear, because they had a lot to say about Trent Alexander-Arnold by the time he left the club. And, with Conor Bradley coming through, they probably thought, you know what, get him out of here and we'll put somebody else in there and we'll be fine. But it's not the case. He was so integral to how they played, so integral for, how they progressed the ball up the field, and so integral for getting Mo Salah involved in the game. And you look at Salah's numbers this season, largely they're down. He's not receiving the ball as much. He's not dribbling as much. He's not in the penalty box as much. He's not having as many shots. And I think that there's a malfunction there. I think Arne Slot has played 7 different right backs, and obviously he's played the same players, but he's not had a consistent right back for the last 7 matches. It's been Bradley, it's been Szoboszlai, he's had Frimpong in, I think that's where a lot of Liverpool's problems in possession are coming from, and a lot of Salah's problems are coming from not having Alexander-Arnold supplying them from behind, actually, and through the midfield too. So let's not overlook the impact that losing Trent Alexander-Arnold has on this Liverpool team, because in a footballing sense he's irreplaceable. There isn't another right back out there like him. I know he's having his struggles at Real Madrid as they adapt to him and he adapts to them, but you can't just say, okay, Alexander-Arnold out, let's put Bradley in. It's not going to work like that. And likewise with Frimpong, they're going to have to figure out a way of replacing that kind of creativity. Now, the square peg in the round hole for the first few matches of the season, I don't know how many games they've played now, 10 or 11 matches they've played this season, has been, he's been pressed into using Szoboszlai there, because he's probably the most stylistically similar on the ball to Trent. Now, we've seen him give away penalties. He's had a few difficulties as an actual right back in that position. I just don't think there's a long-term fix there with putting Szoboszlai at right back. Something's going to have to give. But for this season, look, Salah's going to be away in a couple of months' time for the AFCON. That's going to take him out for up to 10 matches. He's just helped Egypt qualify for the World Cup again. So there's a big onus on him on international level this season too. So I don't know. I think we could be looking at maybe an ordinary season for Salah, which would still be a very good season for any other striker, because I'm looking at his goal contributions. I think he's still got 3 goals and 3 assists already this season, and people are asking what's wrong with Mo Salah. It's like, well, he's still doing the business, even though it's not to the same extent as last year. But there's no doubt that the pipeline has been sort of cut off to him from losing Trent Alexander-Arnold, I think.
Yeah, you're used to greatness and you expect greatness, I think, is what's happened with Salah. And like you said, the Egypt thing is a big thing at the moment because he's helped them qualify for the World Cup. He's become the top African goal scorer in
20 goals, And his last World Cup was completely spoiled by, he went into that World Cup injured after Sergio Ramos dislocated his shoulder in the Champions League final. So although he's going to be, I think, 34 by the time the World Cup will kick off, I think it's going to be weighing on his mind. He's running out of time in the international arena for an AFCON. I mean, they won it 3 times in a row. I think just prior to Salah getting into the Egypt team. And obviously he helped them back to the World Cup, but he's still got a lot to prove, I think, at international level in terms of, winning an AFCON trophy and then going one better than they went at the last World Cup, and actually, him making an impact at a World Cup. So there's no doubt that's going to be on his mind this season too. Anyway, we're talking about AFCON in the World Cup when this is a Transfers podcast. Come on.
Yeah. we're looking ahead, and one player that has been suggested as a possible replacement for Salah when he does go to AFCON is one of those new signings, and it is Jeremie Frimpong.
Yeah.
And do you think that's going to be a fit? Do you think Arne Slot is going to do that? Because Frimpong, he hasn't been the Frimpong of Bayer Leverkusen, and I don't think any of the players left Bayer Leverkusen this summer actually have been as good elsewhere.
No, they haven't.
That's what happened probably when you have Xabi Alonso managing you, the best of you. But Frimpong, I think we're waiting to see the best. And I think people questioned at the time that he wasn't the most offensive-minded right back.
He's not a right back.
Right wing back for Alonso. And he's not
a right back.
He had the score. If you looked at his heat map, it was never. He would not be playing close to his own corner flag.
Never
put it that way.
Never.
Yeah.
Everything was happening in the opposition half, and he's another one that likes the ball to feet, but he dribbles. That's the difference between him and Alexander-Arnold as a right back. Is that when Alexander-Arnold likes to get the ball to feet, and then he'll have a look, and he could play a ball into midfield into Gravenberch, or he could play the ball down the line in behind and get Salah going. Whereas Frimpong gets the ball in front of him and he likes to run with it, which means his starting position needs to be a little bit higher up so he can actually make, gain yards into the opposition half. But he's not a right back. It was a strange signing to me. If I was looking at that and thinking, okay, Liverpool are selling Trent, well, they actually did sell him. They got 10 million for him, which is not bad. But they're getting rid of Trent Alexander-Arnold and bringing in Jeremie Frimpong. That to me would indicate a change of system. But instead, for the first game of the season, they actually played him at right back, which I think maybe he had one season at right back for Leverkusen in his entire senior career. Everything else was played either as a right winger or on that right side of a middle four. So it's not a natural position for him to play right back. So yeah, that's why I would say that Bradley for me is probably going to end up their first choice right back. But I think he's been a bit of a disappointment, if I'm honest, in terms of, he's been substituted twice, I think, at halftime now for Liverpool this season. Hasn't looked as capable as a starter as he did as a deputy, which might sound a bit strange. But I think the same thing happened to Keller. When he gets a run of games and is established as number one, not as good as he looks when he's a reserve and just jumping in for a game or two. But yeah, for me, I think when AFCON happens, I think you will see Frimpong play further up. They did that against Galatasaray. He didn't have the best of games, but he was getting to the byline and he was making his dribbles and was making some penalty area entries. But that's his best position. He's a winger or a right wing back. The issue for Liverpool is that if they wanted to accommodate Frimpong, I'm not saying he's, worth accommodating in terms of you change your team for him. But if they were going to accommodate him, they have to play three at the back. But if they play three at the back, they need another centre back because they've literally only got three centre backs at the moment. So, and plus, I don't think Arne Slot has ever played anything other than a variation of this formation that he's playing right now throughout his entire career. So I don't think it's going to switch around for Frimpong. So either he adapts or he's going to have to get used to life on the bench, aside from that period when Salah goes to the AFCON.
Yeah, do you think maybe because we are a transfers podcast, like you said, it's the name of the show. Will Liverpool go back into the market maybe to get a centre back? Because Leone, their big centre back signing, or any sort of defender, maybe a right back, their big centre back signing. He's injured at the moment.
Yeah, so that's a disaster. Yeah, that's so sad, really. He had a very promising debut up until the point he got injured, and the diagnosis is absolutely devastating for a kid like that. I think he's only played 17 or 18 matches in his entire senior career to this point. To suffer a torn ACL and be missing for a year for his career. I mean, yeah, that is absolutely devastating. And now, I think they did need him this season too. They needed a fourth centre back. Konate hasn't been the most reliable from a fitness perspective. He had a great season last year, but he still missed a few matches here and there. And even before that, Liverpool fans had probably given up on Konate a couple of seasons ago, thinking he's never going to be fit. We're never going to get any more than 25 matches out of this guy in a season. But Joe Gomez isn't much better when it comes to his fitness either. So Van Dijk is really going to have to carry those two through the season. And then there's the form issue as well with Konate, because he's not been in brilliant form this season. He's had a few decent games here and there, but he's had a pop at the fans, talking about his form and saying, don't forget what I did last season and so forth. But, ideally, at another big club, look at Arsenal, they've got about 5 or 6 centre-backs. City, when, over the last few years, they've always, you wouldn't know who was going to start at centre-back because they had, so many options there. Whereas Liverpool are, not to use too a derogatory term, but they're stuck with him. They're stuck with Konate. They're going to have to start him whether his form is good or not. There's nobody there to put pressure on him. Will they go in January? I've seen a few conflicting reports. Now, I think Liverpool's priority is a senior centre-back. I think they need somebody who can hit the ground running. I've seen players like Van Heck, who plays for Brighton, linked with Liverpool. I've seen Ronald Araujo, Barcelona player, linked with Liverpool. And obviously Mark Guéhi as well, who's been linked. And that's the type of player they're going to need. They're not going to need another Leone or a Baumann or Yori Bass. Those two are both at Ajax, by the way, two younger centre-backs. I don't think they're going to, if they are bringing in a centre-back, they're not going to bring in a project, we'll put him in for a few games and see how he gets on. I think they're going to need somebody to put pressure on Konate and start a few matches. So can they get a deal done for Guéhi? That would seem to be the most likely outcome, because Palace aren't going to want to lose him for free at the end of the season, even though it looks like that's a fait accompli now for Guéhi. He looks like he's positioning himself for a free transfer next summer, whether that be to Liverpool or somewhere else. There might just be an opportunity for Liverpool to get in there with a 20 million bid, 25 million bid and take Guéhi in January. All depends on how Palace are going, though, as well. I mean, they've started the season in very good form, aside from losing to Everton. But they are, they're a force to be reckoned with right now. And they might say, well, we've got ambitions of our own. We want to qualify for the Champions League. Well, you're not getting our captain for 20 million. So I don't know. It remains to be seen. I think they could do with another centre-back, but I would be surprised if they moved for one in January.
Yeah, it would have to be someone that's affordable, and Guéhi seems the right option, because perhaps he will be affordable because of that imminent free transfer. But
there's no incentive for him to move, I don't think, right now, because he's probably resigned himself to stay and put for the rest of the season. And given his age, I think he'll be 26 by the time next summer rolls around. And there's issues all over Europe for centre-backs. Real Madrid are about to lose Alaba and Rudiger on free transfers. Bayern Munich are, they could be losing Upamecano. There's issues everywhere at the big clubs. And I do think that Guéhi will find himself in big demand. It could be a blockbuster summer for him. So although Liverpool were very, very close to sign him on transfer deadline day, I think they've lost their clear run at him now, which is a big problem. And even if it's his dream club and he thinks, my career could progress very, very nicely there, I mean, who wouldn't listen to offers from everybody at this stage? That's only natural. So sadly for Liverpool, they may have lost their best shot of enticing Guéhi to the club.
Yeah, we'll just have to see, and Liverpool fans will hope that Crystal Palace lose a lot of games between now and Christmas.
Yeah. Well, they're playing Liverpool again, so they're obviously going to win that, because that's what always happens when they're playing Liverpool at the moment. The Community Shield, the league, now they've got them again in the EFL Cup. Just seems to be a bogey team at the moment. But he's a fantastic manager as well, Glasner. They've had to adapt to losing Eze. They've had to adapt to losing Olise last summer as well. I think they've only got 3 centre-backs of their own as well, even though they play a back 3. So I've been really, really impressed with Palace, actually. I know it's not the Palace podcast or anything like that, but...
That's next week.
Next week we'll do a Palace special, yeah. But I've been really impressed with them, so I do take my hat off to them.
Yeah, at the other side of to move on from Crystal Palace, at the other side of the fence, Kerkez has come in, and maybe he hasn't lived up to expectations either. Or
no.
Is he living up to your expectations? Is this what you expected from him?
Well, I'm not going to profess to have watched every Bournemouth game last season, but from what I saw, and obviously looking into the data, he looks like a very, very, looked like a sure thing. Premier League proven, robust, loads of assists, spending loads of time in the opposition half, creating chances, very quick, very strong. I thought, he's plug and play, isn't he? It looked exactly what Liverpool needed. It's not worked out like that. And I saw my colleague Sam Maguire was speaking about just the difference in how Kerkez is playing. He noticed that his body language. He's very, very predictable in terms of where he's going to play the ball. Everything is going back inside to Gravenberch, and it's making that's having a lot of knock-on effects through the midfield for Liverpool, because opposition know that the ball is going to be funneled to left back. And they only have to look at Kerkez's body language or his body shape to know it's going back into Gravenberch, and it's having a big knock-on effect in terms of how Liverpool can get going through the midfield. Now, looking at Bournemouth last year, again, you want to talk about heat map, the difference in heat maps. Kerkez's heat map this season is sort of unrecognisable to what he had for Bournemouth last year. He's spending way more time in his own half, whereas last season's heat map looked a bit like Wirtz's heat map at Bayer Leverkusen, which was high on the left, in that half space, making loads of penalty box entries, like the aggressive front-footed attacking left back that he was supposed to be. It's just not happened so far at Liverpool. I don't know whether they're going to let the shackles off at some stage and say, on you go, we've got you covered back here. But right now, it definitely an adaptation process. But, cautious optimism, I think, when it comes for Kerkez, because I remember when Andy Robertson signed for Liverpool, for example, it took him months to get into the team before Arne Slot would trust him. And there was players like Firmino, and there was players like Fabinho, where it took them, 2, 3, 4 months to get up to speed, and fans were questioning, why have we signed these guys? They're no good, whatever. And then they ended up becoming, Premier League winners, Champions League winners. So in time, this is the important thing. We're only a few games into the tenure for these guys at Liverpool. In time, I would expect somebody like Kerkez to come good, because I just think he's too explosive. He's got too much potential, for that not to happen. Now, he's made mistakes. The one against Palace last week was dreadful in clearing the ball with his wrong foot. He had that really rash booking against Burnley a few weeks back, which led to him being substituted during the first half. He was substituted as well in another game, maybe the Bournemouth game at the start of the season. It's not really worked out for him so far, but they've invested a lot in him. He's a young player, very young player. I do think that in time, once he gets up to speed with what Arne Slot is asking from him, then I think Kerkez should be okay.
Yeah, so basically, this transition is a transition.
Yes, it is a transition period.
Yeah.
I wanted to pick that up from the beginning when people were saying it's not a transition period. They won the league, they spent 450 million. It's not a transition period. Well, excuse me, it is a transition period, because we complain when teams allow their squads to go stale. They win 2 or 3 titles, like it happened to City, for example. They win 2 or 3 titles. It happened to Bayern too. When you have that success and you let those players get into their 30s together, give them big contracts, and then it stops happening for them. And we always say, the best thing to do is to strengthen from a position of dominance or from a position of strength, which is exactly what Liverpool have done. Now, I think from the start of last season compared to where, expectations were, last season's title was a bit of a bonus for Liverpool. I don't think anybody would have predicted that they're going to win the league with Arne Slot, with that particular squad, with Jurgen Klopp's squad, as it were. But they did. And I think they had to take that opportunity. They've got the new stand, the new sponsorship deals, a lot of money coming on flow for getting back into the Champions League. Obviously, money now from winning the league. The money is there and it needs to be spent. They're probably looking at guys, with all due respect, like a Nunez or a Diaz, or the guys that they got rid of from midfield, like Tyler Morton and Harvey Elliott, thinking, you know what, they're not good enough for us to sustain this kind of dominance in English football. So we're going to need to switch it up right now while we can. So I think it's the right decision to do that, to strengthen from a position of dominance. But obviously the knock-on effect of that is you're having to integrate, half a dozen players into the lineup all at once. So there are going to be teething problems. It's far too early right now to make any sort of judgment about where Liverpool are going to finish this season. Now, they're only, I think, 1 point off the top of the league.
1 point, yeah.
1 point, yeah.
Yeah.
I know that all the games that they've played have been very, very tight. They've been, hair 'em, scare 'em, and beaten in the last minute and winning games in the last minute and things like that. But, it's not like they're Man United, although they're doing all right at the minute too. But, it's a crisis. Last season, Spurs and Man United, that's a crisis. 16th, 17th, barely hanging on into the Premier League. That's a crisis. Liverpool are second right now and they're the defending champions. So, no reason to panic, but, certainly a lot for Slot to think about over this international break.
Yeah, it's kind of going to be interesting to see how they come back after the international break. Like we said, Isak will probably be up to speed. Then they'll have mostly be able to choose the first 11. We'll be able to see what Slot has planned with all these signings.
Yeah.
I know Alisson is obviously missing, but that's standard for at least 6 weeks of the year. He usually goes missing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, how many matches did I think Keller got maybe 20 matches last season, which is sort of unheard of for a substitute goalkeeper. I think he played 9 or 10 matches in the Premier League, which is far too many for your sub goalkeeper to be playing. Now, I think that's one of the issues that Liverpool had on their mind when they signed Mamardashvili. They had to sign him a year ahead of schedule, as it were, and leave him on loan at Valencia. But I think Richard Hughes, the sporting director, was convinced that there was probably, in his age bracket and for the price that they could acquire him for, there was no better goalkeeper available for them. So they went and pulled the trigger on that deal. Now, Alisson is 33 now. Let's say he's missing 20% of the matches in a season. They've got an option to, I think, renew his contract until 2027. So he'd be leaving then anyway when he's 34, 35. But in the meantime, he might end up losing his place if he can't sustain that fitness. Now, for me, there's no doubt about it. I think he's still one of the best goalkeepers in the world right now. But what use is a goalkeeper to you, and sitting in the stand? So that's why Mamardashvili came in. And I think he's been solid in his first couple of appearances, Mamardashvili. I think the only issue that I can see with him is that Konate and Van Dijk are so used to playing the ball back to Alisson that they keep playing the ball back on his wrong foot. They keep playing it back to a right-footed goalkeeper when he's actually left-footed. He's having to shift the ball across to his left foot all the time. So if he's going to get a run in the team, then they need to really, pay attention to that. But I like Mamardashvili. I think he comes with great confidence. He said last year that he wasn't coming to sit on the bench, that he was going to push Alisson all the way. So he's demonstrating the right attitude. And like I said, given his age and given his profile, there's no way he's signed as a substitute goalkeeper. No way. He's definitely breathing down Alisson's neck.
Yeah, so the kind of looking at all these new signings, how they fit in, how they've done so far. What do you think Slot does between now and AFCON starts, or now in the January window? How does he fit in everything? How does he solve this crisis that we're hearing about, despite them only being 1 point off the top of the table?
Oh, I wish I could have a crisis like that. Well, you know what? It's up until the next international break, which is halfway through November. They've got Man United and they've got City, and I'm sure they've got Real Madrid in the Champions League as well. So there's not a lot of time for tinkering and messing about and saying, will this work? Will that work? I have to get points on the board here. So I think he's going to have to go with what he feels is his strongest 11 in most of the matches, in all the matches, I would say. I wouldn't expect him to be, conducting too many rotations here and there and giving Chiesa minutes or, anything like that. So, but what is his best 11 right now? I think the perception that he has in his mind was at the start of the season was he was going to break up that midfield, whether that be McAllister dropping out of the lineup and Szoboszlai being accommodated in there, or whether it was Szoboszlai dropping out of the lineup and Florian Wirtz going in there. But as we saw, I think it was the game over the weekend in the Chelsea game, or was it the week before, he reverted back to that midfield three. It was the weekend. He went back for that midfield three. Now, it got broken up as the game went on. I think Bradley went off and Szoboszlai went to right back, and various other changes took place. Gravenberch ended up playing in centre back as well. But if I was Slot, I would find the temptation to play that midfield three very, very difficult to resist, because I think that was the bedrock for the title win last year. Obviously with Trent's supply, and we spoke about Trent already, but I just think they complemented each other so well in that midfield three. Now, has there been a bit of regression in the game of Alexis McAllister? I would say yes. He hasn't been the same player since the run-in. He was injured. He had to play a few games where he wasn't at full fitness. He was dropped altogether for the last couple of games of the season. Had no pre-season really to speak of. And when he has dropped back into the lineup, he's not looked the same player. Didn't look the same player for Argentina either on their last international break. So that's a problem, I think, that Slot's going to have to resolve, whether McAllister is on the slide or whether he's just in a iffy patch of form that he needs to play himself out of. But they don't really have an awful lot of options in that midfield. I mean, after those three, you're into Curtis Jones and Endo, because they got rid of Elliott and they got rid of Morton as well, of course, and McConnell has gone on loan. Now, what do you do with Jones? I think Jones has had a brilliant start to the season. He's an under-the-radar player, but he passes the ball forward, which is key crucial for a Liverpool midfielder. He just hasn't been able to establish himself as that nailed-on starter. But if I'm Curtis Jones, I'm probably thinking I could take McAllister's place in the team.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be positive about with this Liverpool team looking ahead. I think that we've learned two things: transition, yes. Crisis, no.
No, definitely not. I mean, like I said, I don't know how much you can deduce from reading the chatter online, but like, if Liverpool's certain, I'm not saying that most Liverpool fans are keeping it in perspective. Let's be honest, but there's certain Liverpool fans melting down and saying we're doomed and all this kind of thing. But you mentioned the Jota situation, you mentioned the new players coming in, obviously key players leaving. There are reasons why Liverpool might not be firing on all cylinders right now. But like I said, 1 point off the top place, already beating a decent side in Europe in Atletico Madrid, progressed already in the EFL Cup. excitement over these new players that they've brought in. Yeah, I think sunny days are not far away.
Yeah, just be patient.
Be patient. Yeah.
That's good advice for life. So hopefully it wasn't like two Irish guys in the pub just chatting at Liverpool, because there wasn't a lot of shouting or
drinking.
Wasn't any drinks spilled.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to do the drinking now. It's still the morning when we're recording this, but
it's 5 to 12, so we can actually have a drink in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Socially acceptable.
So let's get finished up.
Yeah.
Let's get finished up. Thanks very much for your time, Peter. You can catch Peter on Anfield Watch, obviously. And make sure to click into Anfield Watch for all your Liverpool news. So thanks, Peter.
Thanks for having us, Ronan.
Yeah, you're most welcome. So you've been listening to the Transfers podcast powered by FootballTransfers.com. If you liked what you heard, please follow, rate and share us. Your support helps us bring you more analysis and news that you want. So you can message us on Instagram, YouTube and Facebook at Transfers Podcast. Our Twitter and Blue Sky is at TransfersCast. Our production is by Mark Caulfield at Pro Podcast Production. And our music is by Mark Caulfield and David L. Stay safe, be well, and thank you for listening.